Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, October 13th, 2023. House Republicans nominate Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio for Speaker, a move that came after their former nominee, Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana, withdrew when it became clear he got support from a majority of House Republicans, but not the 217 Republicans, a majority of the full House, which would be needed to be elected Speaker. In a secret ballot today, Congressman Jordan received 124 votes. A challenger, Austin Scott of Georgia, got 81 votes. So now Congressman Jordan faces the same task of trying to win over those who did not support him before the full House takes its vote. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is in Israel reaffirming the U.S. will stand by that country after the attacks by Hamas, saying the deliberate cruelty of Hamas vividly reminds me of ISIS, bloodthirsty, fanatical, and hateful. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who was in Israel, goes to Jordan to meet with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas before heading to Qatar to meet with the Prime Minister there. Secretary Blinken saying that he has urged Israel, as it continues to hit targets in Gaza controlled by Hamas, to take every possible precaution to avoid civilian casualties and to create safe zones in the enclave where shelter, food, water, and medical supplies can be provided. And President Biden travels to the Port of Philadelphia, announcing it is one of 7 regional hubs selected to produce and deliver hydrogen fuel, paid for with $7 billion from the infrastructure law of 2021, all part of his clean energy plan to limit greenhouse gas emissions. This reporting from thehill.com. House Republicans nominated Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, for Speaker on Friday, the conference's second attempt to find a candidate who can win the gavel on the House floor. Jordan, currently chair of the House Judiciary Committee, earned 124 votes to win the nomination over Austin Scott of Georgia. Congressman Scott had mounted a last-minute bid for Speaker that was largely seen as a protest to Congressman Jordan's candidacy. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise of Louisiana, the number 2 House Republican, had narrowly defeated Jordan for the Speaker nomination earlier this week, but when it was clear he would not get enough support to win on the House floor, with many holdouts still pledging to support Jordan, he withdrew from the race on Wednesday. That from The Hill. Here's some of the reaction from the Republican members of Congress as they left the room where the secret balloting was taking place. First, Tim Burchett of Tennessee.
What is your sense of the situation right now?
Monday, I hope we get to the floor. I think everybody's going to go home, listen to their constituents, and make a decision. Yeah, I don't know why we're going home. Monday. Yeah, we're Monday. It's Monday. They want us back regular time.
Are you guys coming back for a conference meeting Monday morning? Did they give you?
No, I think they'll probably let us know later about that. But I know we're back Monday.
What about
They didn't get any details really. There's a confusion whether we're just going to go straight to the floor and vote, or we're going to have a conference meeting and then vote Tuesday. So I hope we go to the floor Monday and vote and do a roll call vote. Let's do it, up or down.
And what does it say that there were so many Republicans that were not willing to support the nominee, Jim Jordan, on the floor today?
It was more than we had the last time. I think we're getting close. I mean, and Jim said that if you had a problem, come see him, and he was going to be reaching out to everybody. So I think that's what I would have rather had a roll call vote in there, so we could just had a heads up, so he could know. I mean, it kind of puts him a little bit behind the 8 ball by not knowing exactly who to call. But
it's a pretty bad number, though. I mean, it's a long way to make up.
It's better than on the other end of it. I mean, you know, it's what it is, ma'am, and it's not perfect, but it's democracy. It's the rules. That's what we'll do.
How long do you think this will all go on for?
I expect we'll have a floor vote, and I expect to be 2 floor votes, I suspect.
2? You think he'll get it on 2?
He should get it on 1, but people listen to their constituents over the weekend because he is the second most favorite Republican. I mean, I'm not in the running up for that, of course, but, you know.
Do you think now there's going to be other Republicans starting to whip support for their own candidacies, given how far away Jim Jordan is right now?
I do not.
You think they're going to let this process play out and then maybe take a look at it?
I do.
You don't think that there needs to be like a consensus candidate that emerges? That's Jim Jordan at this point?
I think he is. I think when people get home and, because honestly, the grassroots, there's nobody stronger. You know, white balance. You good? Been doing this for a while.
All right, thank you.
It's Tim. Seriously.
Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee, speaking to reporters after the closed-door meeting of House Republicans, and Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio getting the nomination for Speaker. As you heard Congressman Burchett mention, they'll be taking the weekend off and return on Monday to decide when they will be heading to the House floor for an election itself for Speaker. Associated Press reporting that other potential Speaker choices were also being floated today. Some Republicans proposed simply giving Congressman Patrick McHenry of North Carolina, who was appointed interim Speaker pro tem, greater authority to lead the House for some time. The House without a Speaker is essentially unable to function during a time of turmoil in the U.S. and wars overseas. The political pressure increasingly is on Republicans to reverse course, reassert majority control, and govern in Congress. That was from Associated Press. Also speaking to reporters, Congressman Byron Donalds, Republican from Florida.
All right, thanks, Congressman. Tell us what you think about going home and where things stand.
Well, look, first of all, at this point, the decision of our process going forward is going to be that of Jim Jordan. He is our Speaker designate, so it's going to be his decision. Personally, I think we should stay and finish this, but that's up to him, and I'm going to respect his decision, and whatever Jim needs from me, I will do that.
Is it clear there will be a Speaker vote Monday, or is it a possibility?
That's all in the hands of Jim Jordan. I think it's very possible, but it's in his hands.
Do you think that the second vote tally is indicative of the fact that Jim Jordan can get to 217 on the floor? Do you think it shows that he can get to 217?
Yeah, I think he can, but there's a lot of work that's got to be done in a short amount of time, and so we'll see how his team works through that. But in these type of situations, it's not really something that other members can do. It's going to be him with those people to find a way to get there.
Were you surprised at the total he got in there?
Yeah, I thought it would be higher. So, look, I'm consistent with you guys. Okay, get back to work, figure a way, and that's what he's going to have to do.
And if it can't be Jordan, then you want to run for Speaker?
I don't know at this point.
You want to be Speaker?
What I want to do is get back to work.
Do you see a way out of this at all anytime soon?
Oh, we'll find a way out of it. I mean, that's rest assured that will happen. But this is a process amongst people who are elected, and so it's going to be tough. But we'll get through it, and I think when we do, we're still going to be able to accomplish our work.
Apparently some Democrats have sent McHenry a letter and said that they want to have him act as Speaker, but oversee some legislative actions, resolutions for Israel, that kind of thing.
Well, look, I've never agreed. I never supported that kind of a maneuver, and I think Patrick McHenry was very clear that that is not going to happen. He was emphatic that it's not going to happen, and I support him in that. We're not going to be doing any type of coalition governments around here. We are not a European Parliament. We are the United States. We're going to work through this. There will be a new Speaker of the House, and then we're going to get back to work. All right, see you guys.
Thanks, sir.
Congressman Byron Donalds, Republican from Florida, speaking to reporters. They were talking about that second ballot. Fox News puts it this way. House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan, Republican of Ohio, was nominated for the position of Speaker in a closed-door House Republican conference earlier Friday. Jordan won 124 votes to Congressman Austin Scott's 81, an underwhelming show for the race's frontrunner. Scott, a member with a comparatively lower profile, jumped into the race minutes before it began. After Jordan's nomination, Republicans launched into a second secret ballot vote, this time gauging support on who will support Jordan on the House floor now that he's the nominee. 55 House Republicans said they would vote against Jordan on that vote. He can only afford to lose 4 Republican votes to still win the speakership. That was from Fox News. Also speaking to reporters after the closed-door balloting, Congressman Mike Garcia, Republican from Florida.
We just want to know about the numbers for supporting Jordan on the floor. Was it 55 numbers?
Something like that, yeah, about that. Sounded mid-50s.
So what happens now?
Well, we got 2 days to lobby and make phone calls, understand why people aren't there quite yet, and hopefully get them there before Monday. You start applying the pressure of public opinion and good, intimate conversations, and hopefully that number goes down over the next few days instead of going up. So I'm confident he'll get there. We don't know. It was an anonymous vote, so it's up to those folks to come forward and express their concerns and whatever issues that they may have that are preventing them from getting a yes. But I think the members in our conference will do that. I think Jim will reach out to the appropriate folks to ferret that out, and I think he's going to get there. It's just going to be the next couple of days to lobby to get there.
So you guys are going home for the weekend now?
I think some of us are going. I think some folks are going home. Will be no activity over the weekend except for making the phone calls to try to get the 55 or so folks on board for the big win.
You said it's about bringing the number down, but I mean, it seems like it's going up, right?
The number of no's is.
Hard no's. I mean, like when we were whipping, Scalise, we had, maybe 15 that were hard no against Scalise for the floor. Now we've got 55 that are hard no's against Jordan. We saw what happened with McCarthy as far as...
I don't know the number ever got that low on Scalise. I don't know the exact numbers, but we also didn't do what we just did. We didn't do a secret ballot support or not support the nominee after the election took place between the two candidates. So this is a new data point that's really not apples to apples to anything that we've done in the past. So it's still a big number. Still a lot of meat on the bone here, right? So it's roughly about 30 votes short from where McCarthy was before we went to the floor for him. So we got 48 hours now over the weekend to have those conversations and have those phone calls, get people on board. At some point, you got either critical mass or you don't, and you go to the crucible on the floor and let the American people hear these conversations. A lot of people look at January and think it was an embarrassment. It wasn't ideal, but to me it was still healthy. We did it in public, we had the debate, we eventually got to a yes and concurrence, and we elected a speaker. After 15 rounds, it shouldn't have to be that long. But I'm not opposed to doing that if we have to. I think we owe it to the American people. So thanks, guys.
Congressman Mike Garcia, Republican from California, with reporters after the closed-door meeting and the House Republicans nominating Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, to be their speaker-designate. And the vote was 124 votes for Jim Jordan, and the competitor, Austin Scott of Georgia, getting 81 votes. Some reaction from the Democrats. They're holding a news conference on the steps of the U.S. Capitol as the leader, Hakeem Jeffries of New York, is being introduced.
Hakeem Jeffries. So Whip Clark, Chairman Aguilar, House Democrats, all those assembled, it's my honor and privilege to stand before you with the House Democratic Caucus, which has made clear from the very beginning of this Congress that we will put people over politics. And to do everything possible to find common ground whenever and wherever possible with our Republican colleagues in order to chart a bipartisan path forward to get things done for the American people. That's been our position from day one of this Congress, and it remains our position. Because we are here as members of the House of Representatives to make life better for everyday Americans, not play political games. House Democrats will continue to fight for lower costs, better paying jobs, safer communities, reproductive freedom, defend democracy, fix our broken immigration system, protect the right to vote, and build an economy that works for everyday Americans from the middle out and the bottom up. And we want to find a bipartisan path to reopening the House of Representatives so we can solve problems for the American people and stand with our friends like Israel and Ukraine and others throughout the free world. But the House Republican civil war continues to rage on, miring the Congress in chaos, dysfunction, and extremism. House Republicans have chosen to triple down on the chaos, triple down on the dysfunction, and triple down on the extremism. House Republicans have selected as their nominee to be the Speaker of the People's House the chairman of the Chaos Caucus, a defender in a dangerous way of dysfunction, and an extremist extraordinaire. When we had a narrow majority under the last Congress, led by Speaker Pelosi in partnership with Senate Democrats under the leadership of President Joe Biden, we were able to pass bills to make a difference in the lives of the American people. House Democrats passed legislation to save the economy through the American Rescue Plan by putting shots in arms, money in pockets, and kids back in school, and allow America to be reopened as the strongest economy of any in the developed world. House Democrats were able to pass the bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act to fix our crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, our sewer and water systems, our mass transportation systems, and to ensure that there was high-speed internet access and clean water in every community. House Democrats, with our majority, were able to pass gun safety legislation for the first time in 30 years that will save lives. House Democrats.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the minority leader, and nominated by his party for Speaker. Now that the speakership is vacant and an election will be taking place, Hakeem Jeffries speaking on the steps of the U.S. Capitol with other House Democrats around him. This as House Republicans today, in a closed-door meeting, secret ballot, nominated Jim Jordan of Ohio for the speakership, beating out Austin Scott of Georgia. Jim Jordan getting 124 votes, Austin Scott getting 81. And now Austin Scott has posted on X, formerly Twitter, "I highly respect Jim Jordan. He is an asset to the Republican Party and our nominee for Speaker. Our conference has spoken, and now we must unite behind Jordan so we can get Congress back to work." There'll be no Speaker's vote between now and next week, and we will have coverage when they resume as Congressman Jordan works to get those remaining members on board. He can only afford to lose 4 House Republicans once a floor vote hits, assuming that the Democrats will all support Hakeem Jeffries. Now, to the war between Israel and Hamas on Washington today. Associated Press reports that U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin assured Israel that we have your back as he and America's top diplomat met Friday with Israeli and Arab leaders. There was no indication the U.S. was trying to prevent an expected Israeli ground offensive into Gaza could worsen a humanitarian crisis for the 2.3 million Palestinians trapped in the blockaded territory. The visits to the Middle East by Secretary Austin and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken came as Israel escalated its war against Hamas militants in response to their shocking and brutal rampage last weekend. That from AP. Secretary Austin held a joint news conference with the Israeli Defense Minister in Tel Aviv.
As the U.S. Secretary of Defense, I am here in person to make something crystal clear. America's support for Israel is ironclad, and I extend my deepest condolences to the Israeli people for those killed or wounded in this terrible slaughter by Hamas. I'm also here in solidarity with all the families still living the waking nightmare of not knowing the fate of their loved ones. And we will continue to coordinate closely with Israel to help secure the release of the innocent men, women, and children in the clutches of Hamas, including American citizens.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Tel Aviv, a joint news conference with the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Another paragraph from the AP article, Israel demanded Friday that some 1 million civilians evacuate northern Gaza for their own safety in anticipation of the expected invasion. Palestinians did indeed begin a mass exodus toward the southern part of the besieged territory, even as Hamas dismissed the evacuation as a ploy, and the UN warned of potentially disastrous consequences of so many people fleeing. A reporter asked the Israeli defense minister about this.
There's been some confusion over the 24-hour deadline that Israel announced for civilians in Gaza to move south, to evacuate and move south. There was a 24-hour deadline initially reported, and then there's been reports that Israel has modified that, have left it open. In other words, not sticking to 24 hours of a deadline. Would you please clarify specifically, is there going to be a deadline? What can you tell us about the deadline? And what will Israel do, if anything, to help civilians move? Some of the people have said that's Hamas's problem. It's not our problem.
Well, first of all, I would like to remind all of us what happened less than a week ago. 1,200 Israelis were brutally murdered, raped, burned alive. Kids were tied one to the other and shot at their hand. This is Hamas. This is the ISIS of Gaza. And as the Secretary said, they took evil to another level. That's first issue. Second, Israel never and ever will not shoot civilians in purpose. Therefore, we are asking all the civilians in Gaza City to go south of Gaza. And the reason is that because we don't want to harm them. The camouflage of the terrorist is the civil population. Therefore, we need to separate them. So those who want to save their life, please go south. We are going to destroy Hamas infrastructures, Hamas headquarters, Hamas military establishment, and take this phenomena out of Gaza and out of the earth. They cannot live among human, civilized people.
But 24 hours, is that deadline still holding, the 24 hours?
Thank you very much. We're done for today. Thank you.
Question to the Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant at a news conference in Tel Aviv, along with the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a TV address today saying, "We will eliminate Hamas. We will defeat Hamas. It will take time. This is just the beginning. Our enemies have just begun to pay the price, but I won't go into detail." U.S. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, plans to lead a bipartisan group of senators to Israel this weekend. His office says it's to show the United States' unwavering support for Israel. Senator Schumer is the first Jewish majority leader of the Senate and the highest-ranking Jewish elected official in the United States. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met today with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Amman, Jordan. A readout from the State Department says the Secretary extended his condolences to the families of Palestinian civilian victims of this conflict and reiterated that Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's legitimate right to dignity, freedom, justice, and self-determination. And Secretary Blinken thanked President Abbas for efforts to further calm the region and reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to cooperation with the Palestinian leadership and people on efforts to ensure security for all. There's a story from Al Jazeera that President Abbas told Secretary Blinken that he rejects the forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza, following Israel's order for all the enclave civilians to move to the south. President Abbas said at Friday's meeting in Jordan's capital Amman that such an event would constitute a second Nakba, referring to the mass displacement of Palestinians in the 1948 war surrounding Israel's creation. That, according to the official Palestinian news agency. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken then flew to Qatar and held a joint news conference with the Prime Minister there.
We're meeting today at what is a difficult but also consequential time for the region. In the wake of Hamas's appalling attack, it killed more than 1,300 Israelis, at least 27 American citizens, and people from more than 30 countries. The United States and Qatar share the goal of preventing this conflict from spreading. We discussed in detail our efforts to prevent any actor, state or non-state, from creating a new front in this conflict. We're also working intensively together to secure the release of hostages, including American citizens being held by Hamas in Gaza. I'm grateful for the urgency that Qatar is bringing to this effort. I had an opportunity to meet yesterday with the families of some of those being held hostage by Hamas. Their anguish is profound. They're desperate to bring their loved ones home, and we are working urgently on that effort. We're doing that with Qatar, and we're doing that with allies and partners across the region. As Israel continues to respond to Hamas's devastating attacks, the United States will ensure that it has what it needs to defend its people. Secretary of Defense Austin was in Israel today, doing just that, working closely with the Israelis to make sure that we're providing them what they need and that we'll be able to do that on an ongoing basis. At the same time, we're in constant communication with Israeli officials and with multilateral and international organizations, humanitarian organizations, including the United Nations agencies, including the ICRC, to get aid to civilians in Gaza. As I said yesterday in Tel Aviv, Israel has the right, indeed it has the obligation, to defend its people and to try to ensure that Hamas can never repeat what it's done. We continue to discuss with Israel the importance of taking every possible precaution to avoid harming civilians. We recognize that many Palestinian families in Gaza are suffering through no fault of their own, and that Palestinian civilians have lost their lives. We mourn the loss of every innocent life, Israeli, Palestinian, Jew, Christian, Muslim, as well as civilians of every faith and every nationality who've been killed. Let's not lose sight of why this is happening. Israel is conducting operations in Gaza because Hamas carried out terrorist attacks that killed, in the most horrific ways, 1,300 of its people.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken today in Doha, Qatar, at a joint news conference with the Prime Minister there, Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani, who was asked about the fate of the $6 billion of Iranian oil money being held in Qatar after the transfer from South Korea as part of a prisoner exchange between the U.S. and Iran. There were reports from several news organizations this week that the U.S. had reached an understanding with Qatar not to release the money to Iran. But the Prime Minister today said that Qatar is committed to fulfilling the agreement to unfreeze the funds, and the money will be used in accordance with the agreement between U.S. and Iran. Secretary Blinken talking about the ongoing efforts to find 14 unaccounted-for Americans in Israel who may be being held hostage by Hamas. The White House Deputy Press Secretary Olivia Dalton spoke to reporters on Air Force One today about a call that President Biden had with their families.
This morning, the President, before departing the White House, had an opportunity to meet with his national security team and then had an opportunity to spend more than an hour on a Zoom call with family members of the 14 Americans still unaccounted for following this week's horrific attacks in Israel. Today's call was led by Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs, Roger Carstens, and included a couple members of each family. The President conveyed directly to these families that they have been in his prayers and reaffirmed that the U.S. government is doing everything possible to locate and bring home their loved ones. Several of the family members shared information about their loved ones and their personal experiences as they endure an unimaginable ordeal. White House and State Department officials also stayed on the call to answer any additional questions that these family members had about the ongoing efforts.
Olivia Dalton is Principal Deputy White House Press Secretary with reporters on Air Force One. CBS News' 60 Minutes program released a short clip of their interview with President Biden that'll be airing on Sunday, in which he is asked why he wanted to meet with these family members.
Why do you feel so strongly about speaking to these families personally on Zoom?
Because I think they have to know that the President of the United States of America cares deeply about what's happening. Deeply. We have to communicate to the world this is critical. This is not even human behavior. It's pure barbarism. And we're going to do everything in our power to get them home if we can find them.
Part of President Biden's interview that will be airing on CBS News' 60 Minutes program this weekend. Pro-Palestinian protests, reports ABC News, broke out across the Middle East and beyond on Friday after a former Hamas leader called on supporters to join in a day of rage amid the Israel-Gaza conflict. Large protests have been seen in the capitals of Iraq, where a rally drew tens of thousands of people, Iran and Yemen, and those gathered holding Palestinian flags. In Iran, some protesters could be seen burning the Israeli and American flags. In Beirut, Lebanon, supporters of the political party and militant group Hezbollah held a rally supporting Palestinians and denouncing Israel. Death to Israel and death to America chants reverberated across a crowd of at least a couple thousand. That from ABC News. John Kirby is a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council, and today he said precautions are being taken in the U.S., but intelligence agencies have not seen any credible threats.
Just as we work to provide support to our strongest ally in the Middle East, we are also focused on ensuring the safety of communities here at home. The President and his senior team have been meeting with stakeholders over the past several days, both Jewish and Muslim, who fear outbreaks of violence against them as a result of the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The President has directed the administration to do everything we can to enhance security at home, including, especially in the Jewish community and the Muslim community. Yesterday, the President met with his national security team, along with the Attorney General, Secretary Mayorkas of DHS, and other administration officials in the White House Situation Room to discuss the current homeland threat environment, what we are doing to prepare and to safeguard Jewish and Muslim communities across the country, as well as what we're doing to help protect diplomatic facilities in Washington and in the 8 cities where Israeli consulates are located. That's Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, New York, San Francisco. I want to be completely and crystal clear on one thing. At this time, none of our intelligence agencies have any specific intelligence indicating a threat to the United States stemming from the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel. That said, we continue to remain vigilant to any and all possible threats. Federal, state, and local law enforcement are working around the clock to prevent any violence from occurring. Our goal here is to protect all Americans and to ensure that they feel safe, secure, and protected, and that the federal government is taking a number of steps to address these very legitimate concerns.
John Kirby is Strategic Communications Coordinator for the White House National Security Council in a virtual news conference today. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. President Biden traveled to Philadelphia today to announce the winners of a $7 billion federal competition to produce and deliver hydrogen fuel, part of the president's clean energy plan. There were 23 finalists, 7 winners. Associated Press explains the infrastructure law signed by President Biden in 2021 included billions of dollars for a program to establish 6 to 10 regional hydrogen hubs. The aim is to help industry replace fossil fuels such as coal and oil, which produce planet-warming greenhouse gases, with cleaner burning hydrogen as an energy source for vehicles, manufacturing, and generating electricity. President Biden spoke at the Tioga Marine Terminal.
I made it a goal for our country to get to net zero emissions from pollutants no later than 2050. By the way, it's the only existential threat to humanity. Is we don't do this, we don't stay below these numbers, the whole world's changing. Our kids are going to be, and our grandkids are going to be, anyway, I don't want to even think about it. Clean hydrogen is going to help us meet that goal. When it comes to charging our cars or powering our homes, all we need is clean electricity to power, to get from solar and wind. That's just fine. We're doing that, and we're getting close to meeting that goal. But when it comes to manufacturing things like steel, aluminum, and other materials, factories need to process materials at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit to get that done. You need to burn fuel to get that done. You can't get it done with wind and solar projects. You cannot generate that much energy. That's where hydrogen comes in. Hydrogen can power industries like the production of steel and aluminum. It can transfer, and it's going to end up changing our transportation system, like trucks, rail, planes. Clean hydrogen produces energy resources like wind and solar. That lets us get to this place without putting more carbon in the atmosphere. You know, when I put that forward, they said we couldn't do anything bipartisanly in the Congress. Well, I introduced the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It got passed. It got passed, even though we only had a couple votes extra in the Senate. and contained funding to harness the benefits of hydrogen and encourage states and industries to join together to create things called hydrogen hubs. And folks, those hubs are about people coming together across state lines, across industries, across political parties to build a stronger, more sustainable economy and to rebuild our communities. The hub is in the Middle Atlantic region. It's made up of 17 sites spanning southeastern Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. And the hubs are existing infrastructure supporting oil industry and oil pipelines and refineries and repurpose and regenerate, store, transport, and use clean hydrogen instead. This hub alone is going to produce 100,000 tons of hydrogen per year, 100,000 tons. Up to $750 million in public investment is attracting $2.25 billion in private investment.
President Biden today at the Port of Philadelphia. You can find his full remarks at our video library at cspan.org. Republican presidential candidate Perry Johnson also talking about energy policy today. He was at the New Hampshire Republican First in the Nation Leadership Summit hosted by the New Hampshire Republican State Committee and held in Nashua, New Hampshire.
We should be producing as much oil as possible. Let's face it, there's nobody in the world does a better job of extracting and refining oil than the United States. But do you know when Biden took office what he did? He immediately stopped all production on federal lands. And when he did that, it was a travesty, but we took him to court. And now he is drilling, but the amount of drilling that's taking place is so low you have to go back to Truman's years to get that low. He also put all these new regulations in place so that the small producer could not produce anymore and make money. But what we did, we didn't stop flying, we didn't stop driving, we didn't stop our machinery, we didn't stop producing plastic, we still needed oil. So we ended up spending $61 billion buying the oil from Russia. And do you know, when Russia goes and extracts oil and refines it, it's much worse for the earth? In fact, when they convert it to natural gas, they put 5 times the amount of methane in the air that we do. It's a sin that we do this. We're contaminating the earth, and as a result, everybody going to the pump is paying 100% more for the gas than they should be. Now, I ask you, does that make any sense?
Businessman Perry Johnson and Republican presidential candidate today at the New Hampshire Republican Party Forum in Nashua, New Hampshire. New Hampshire will be holding the first in the nation presidential primary for the Republican Party early next year, part of C-SPAN's Campaign 2024 coverage. From WJBK-TV in Detroit, United Auto Workers Union President Shawn Fain will no longer wait until Friday to add more union members to the strike, he announced during an update. Typically, Shawn Fain has used Friday morning updates to announce the addition of more UAW members to picket lines. Last week was the first Friday since the strike began on September 15th that he did not call on more workers to strike. However, in a surprise move Wednesday, he called on 8,700 members at the Ford, Kentucky assembly plant to join the picket line. This will be the approach moving forward. Shawn Fain said this change is because the automakers have been waiting until Friday mornings to make substantial changes to their offers because they know the announcement will be coming. He said, "We changed the rules, and now there's only one rule: pony up." That was from Fox 2 in Detroit. Here is part of Shawn Fain's Facebook Live update this morning.
This week, we entered an entirely new phase of our stand-up strike. And let me tell you the story of how the mighty Kentucky truck plant of UAW Local 862 transpired. For 2 weeks, Ford's been telling us there's more money to be had. They've said, hang on, we're close, but there's still some room to continue to sweeten the deal. On Wednesday, they owed us an offer, and they gave us a call. They wanted to meet over Zoom, and they wanted to pass the same economic offer that they passed 2 weeks ago with no more money. So we said, if you're going to offer us nothing, you're going to do it to our face with our full national negotiating team in the room. We went to Ford headquarters to see what they had to say for themselves. It was not a long meeting. They tried to give us the same deal that we rejected 2 weeks ago, and not a dollar more. So at that point, I said, that's all you have for us? Our members' lives and my handshake are worth more than that. You just cost yourself Kentucky Truck Plant. We had management leave the room, and Vice President Browning and Kentucky Truck Plant Chairperson John Jaggers, who's on the National Negotiating Committee, and myself made the call. And we let John make the call to take the plant out. We didn't wait till Friday, and we didn't wait a minute. We then called President Todd Dunn at Local 862, and he and his local leadership walked 8,700 members off the job. And of course, they had the unwavering support of Regional Director Tim Smith. This is Ford's biggest plant. Ford, of course, put out a statement about how unfair this action is. In that same statement, they admitted that Kentucky Truck generates $25 billion in revenue a year.
The UAW President Shawn Fain, part of his online update this morning. Story from Automotive News. A top Ford Motor Company executive on Thursday said the company had reached the limit of what it could offer the UAW economically in a new labor contract, but remained hopeful it could reach an agreement that meets some of the union's priorities. Kumar Galhotra, president of Ford Blue, told reporters that the automaker can improve that offer without becoming uncompetitive. He said, "We have reached our limit. We've actually stretched ourselves to get to this point. We're open to moving some money around within the deal that might fit the union's needs better. But broadly speaking, from an overall cost of the deal perspective, yes, we're there." That from Automotive News. The UAW strike currently involves about 34,000 of the 146,000 UAW members on the picket lines in front of the factories run by the big three U.S. automakers Ford, GM, and Stellantis, owner of Chrysler. Wall Street today, the Dow up 39, NASDAQ down 166, and S&P down 21. The newest U.S. Senator, LaFonza Butler, Democrat from California, made her first public appearance this week since being appointed to fill out the rest of the term of the late Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat from California. Dianne Feinstein died on September 29th. LaFonza Butler was sworn in Washington on October 3rd. And then this past Monday, October 9th, she was interviewed at the Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit in Dana Point, California. She was asked about being the third African-American woman in U.S. Senate history.
It is not lost on me that there was Carol Moseley Braun, there was Kamala Harris, and now there's LaFonza Butler. You know, I was sworn in just last Tuesday, and my mother celebrated her 70th birthday this year, and that in August. And I thought I was doing a big deal, like taking her on our first mother-daughter only. I have two older brothers. Our first mother-daughter trip, just the two of us. We're gonna like knock this 70 thing out, Mom. And then I got to see her in the U.S. Capitol for the first time in her entire life. I got to see her with Senator Cory Booker. I got to see her with Congresswoman Lauren Underwood. I like to call it, I tease her now. I was like, you was living your best MSNBC life, girl. And we all, look, I grew up in a small town in Mississippi. I went to a historically black college. I never thought that the day that I would recognize and see pride in my mother's eyes would be when she was walking up to shake the hands of the vice president who was swearing her daughter, her youngest child, in as the third black woman to serve in this historic chamber. And so it means a lot to me. It means a lot to my family. I think I think it might mean a little bit to my daughter, who's only 9 and chose to not come to the swearing in because she wanted to go camping.
Did she have fun?
It was her first time being able to go camping without her parents having to go. And
we're all experiencing first.
I know, right? And I said, so Nyla, Mama's got this thing going on. And I was like, but you can, do you want to do this or do you want to go camping? And she said, oh, no, I'm going to go camping. I said, well, the vice president's going to be there. She said, well, tell her I said hi.
That's incredible.
So I hope it means something to young girls who maybe are not my daughter, but I hope it is a demonstration of what is possible. When we can imagine together and even when we can't. There's more possible for us. So that's what I hope.
Senator LaFonza Butler, Democrat from California, on Monday at the Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit in Dana Point, California. She was asked, but did not answer whether she plans to run for a full Senate term. The seat is up in 2024, and there are currently 3 U.S. House members already in the Democratic primary. Senate has been out of session this week, but it returns Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern, as always, live gavel to gavel on C-SPAN 2. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making news in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.